wonderful lunch. I want to welcome you back and hope that you all can find your seats quickly. We have a great panel, and so I'm going to get us started. I'm Yoli Flores. I'm a senior fellow with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. I'm not Ralph Smith. Sometimes I'd like to be. He sends his regards, but I am delighted to serve as your moderator for this afternoon's session on leveraging partnerships. I'm especially honored to be with you because it was a partnership between IMLS and the Campaign for Grade Level Reading that resulted in a report that many of you may know called Growing Young Minds. A report that has served as a call to action for libraries and museums to play a significant role in early learning for all children. Indeed, it was as a result of this report that IMLS has invested $8.5 million since 2013 on early learning efforts. For this, we are truly grateful and recognize IMLS's commitment to the youngest and most vulnerable children in our country. The Campaign for Grade Level Reading shares a very similar commitment. About 4 years ago, the Annie E. Casey Foundation released a report that gave birth to the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. The report was called Early Warning: Why Reading by the End of Third Grade Matters. At its release, the director of the campaign, Ralph Smith, shared the following words. We've raised a concern about the alarming number of children who are not proficient readers by the end of third grade, and used the data and the research to suggest that this statistic, which has now stagnated someplace in the zone between abysmal and catastrophic, has significant and long-term consequences for these children, for their families, for their communities, and for our nation. It is no exaggeration to say that left unchecked, this particular problem will compromise and undermine our nation's commitment to end intergenerational poverty. You can hear the sense of urgency in Ralph's words. It is this urgency that has committed us to this work, focusing on school readiness, attendance, and summer learning, three critical contributors to reading and succeeding in school. And it is this urgency that has galvanized over 160 communities across 41 states and organizations like IMLS and many others to put a stake in the ground around the unacceptable reality that too many children can't read. Well, so just how many children is too many? And what did Ralph mean by abysmal and catastrophic? In 2013, 80% of low-income children could not read proficiently. For African American children and Latino children, the data is even worse. For African American boys, it is devastating. This is why IMLS and the Campaign for Grade Level Reading are working hand in hand to reach millions of parents and children in the very early years. And here's why. We all know the science now and how consequential this period is for the developing child from the moment they are born. We know that early learning experiences matter and that only when we open our doors, feed curiosity, offer places where children can explore, touch, interact, make the world come alive, will we all build brains and fuel a love for learning, as the Growing Young Minds report so clearly conveys. And this is why partnerships matter. It is in reaching out and connecting with others that our work can prosper on behalf of kids and families. The research tells us that parents of young children, especially low-income families, are hungry and eager for places like the library and museums that can nurture their children and put them on a path to success. Our panelists today will share with us how they are engaging and leveraging partnerships to reach these families and their children. We're eager to hear from them, so without further ado, let me introduce you to Sherri Killins, Kyle Zimmer, and Janet McKinney. Sherri is Director of Systems Alignment and Integration for the BUILD Initiative, which works with state and national leaders to develop coordinated, high-quality systems of early childhood care and education committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In her role at BUILD, Sherri has helped implement the 2014 IMLS Cooperative Agreement to better integrate museums and libraries into statewide early childhood systems. The project is working with 5 pilot states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Washington, and creating an early childhood systems self-assessment tool. Kyle. Since 1992, Kyle has led First Book, a nonprofit social enterprise that she co-founded to assure that local schools and community programs serving low-income kids and families have a steady supply of brand new, high-quality books. In fulfilling its mission, First Book has built a rigorous online registration process to authenticate that the individuals, programs, and classrooms are serving children in need. First Book's existing network will help distribute access credentials for the open eBooks platform among communities of low-income youth. And you'll hear a lot more about that from Kyle. And third is Janet. Janet serves as Director of Library Development for the Maine State Library, Maine as in the state of Maine, which is part of an existing new IMLS National Leadership Grant effort to help public libraries serve as community science centers. It's called Cornerstones of Science. In Maine and in Massachusetts, this will mean developing the capacity for new partnerships and community outreach that will allow more kids more access to the science and technology that's right in their backyards. And before we hear from Sherri, Kyle, and Janet, I also want to recognize Brian Gallagher, the Executive Director of Reach Out and Read, who wanted to be with us also today. He's under doctor's orders to stay home and recover from strep throat. But I know that Brian was planning to tell us all about Reach Out and Read and their new partnership with IMLS called Prescription for Success. This is an effort to deepen connections between pediatricians and libraries and museums in ways that help strengthen partnerships that promote early literacy. And we wanted to be sure all of you knew about that as a resource. I'm now going to ask Sherri, Kyle, and Janet to say a bit more about their organizations and their work with IMLS, especially so that all of us can learn more about those connections and cross-sector partnerships that promote early learning and literacy, especially for low-income children and families. In terms of format, they will each take 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll open it up to you for questions. If there's a burning question for clarification right after each one of them, I can take a couple. But if not, we'll wait until the 3 of them share, and then we'll open it up to all of you. And we'll start with Sherri.
Thank you, Yoli, and thank you, IMLS, for inviting me here today. Excited to be here with all of you. I've actually gotten a chance to go to the American Library Association conference last year because as BUILD was putting together this partnership with IMLS, we did lots of listening and talking to both libraries and museums. The BUILD initiative works with state leaders around the country to develop comprehensive programs, policies, and services that meet the needs of young children and their families. We really focus on building integrated systems between health, early learning, and family support with attention to early intervention to try to remediate or prevent risks. This systems building approach is happening all across the country. So when IMLS approached us about being a partner in implementing some of the recommendations from the Growing Young Minds report, we thought we were the perfect partner to really create deliberate, mutually beneficial connections between museums, libraries, and early childhood systems. We wanted to build relationships that were embedded and had the ability to be replicated and sustained. The Growing Young Minds report had a couple of recommendations. They wanted to increase access to high-quality early learning experiences. They wanted to engage and support families. They wanted to create seamless links between early learning and the early grades. They wanted to improve family health, nutrition by ensuring families have access to information. They wanted to leverage their community and state partnerships, and they wanted to build and really be active participants in the early networks across the state and within their community. So we began by working with state librarians who often brought local libraries or regional libraries to the table. We worked with museums, and we worked with state early childhood systems leaders. And while we targeted 5 states, we really began this work with a series of webinars that were often attended by 400 and 500 people from across the country, again, trying to make more visible the work in early learning from the state level to libraries and museums, and make more visible to libraries and museums the work going on at the state level. In fact, those webinars are taped, and you can find them on the Build Initiative website if you're interested in hearing more about them. But we did do deeper work in the 5 states that Yoli mentioned to really understand the state context, the partnerships, and to really learn from libraries what was necessary. Everyone agreed that children are most significantly shaped by their families and their communities, and that the state early childhood system really has to be designed in a way to recognize and respond to families and communities and cultures. And we see libraries and museums as really anchor institutions. Your physical building sits in those communities. And so, of course, you had a lot to share. We really wanted you to help inform the state early childhood system, its vision, but also take advantage of a lot of the tools and information that have been created at the state level. And early on, it was clear we agreed on some things. We agreed that there's a science behind child development, and you've mentioned a lot today the importance of professional development, but many libraries are doing that across the country with the resources that they have. We agreed that children need literacy, and often libraries have been forgotten by state systems when they had huge early literacy campaigns, but that it wasn't just literacy, the book, it was the social emotional development, it was the cognitive development, it was the language and literacy, it was also the physical and motor development, and the children and families' approaches to learning that was really going to feed their ability to become strong learners and readers. And you agreed that there were some children that were just left out, that you thought about libraries as places that had equal access, but many of you had already discovered that just being an anchor institution or a building in a community wasn't sufficient. Many of you were already going out and doing activities in the community, of course financially stressed to do that and only usually able to do it around grants, and that there were often children and families who needed more support to be able to enter your space and your institution. And everybody's funded with these multiple funding streams, and so there was a lot of agreement that partnerships were usually created around a grant, and that was a part of what we wanted to change. We wanted to build those partnerships so that people could go to them before there was a grant and the foundation had already been laid. A lot of times this was the first conversation between especially libraries and museums and state early learning systems. Often people had big relationships with an institution like Head Start, but not with individual families and not necessarily at the state level. Everybody agreed that on every level, whether it was libraries, museums, or early childhood systems, there needed to be intentionality in terms of professional development. In fact, libraries often had the skills, knowledge, and ability to provide professional development to early childhood educators in their communities. And in one state, Pennsylvania, that became a part of what they were able to do. We began by creating a toolkit. Our charge from the Institute for Museum and Library Science was to identify what was necessary to understand in 5 different contexts, the 5 states that we've described, what was necessary so that we could build a toolkit that didn't necessarily have TA attached to it, but that a librarian in a community, a state leader, a museum could pick up and begin to use. We wanted that toolkit to help recognize the importance of what's going on in libraries and museums, and we found in our work that since everybody agreed about family engagement, that was an area where folks could work together. So we've created that toolkit. It has 4 major sections. One is simply articulating the strengths of libraries, museums, and early childhood systems, having that shared conversation. The second section is on creating agreement. What should we work on together? This project had no new money, and so getting people to agree that there was something to do together was a lot about high needs children and using the data, as Yoli pointed out, to say who aren't we meeting the needs of. We have a section on designing and implementing strategies, and then a section about the partnership. And so our next steps are to publish that toolkit sometime this summer. We're encouraging state leaders who we have a lot of access to at Bill to include libraries on their planning groups at the region and local level, and we've seen some of that happen in our state. And we want to continue to build strong partnerships between states and communities in a larger frame around creating supportive communities.
Kyle.
All right.
Clarifying questions? Yep. Okay, good. Kyle.
I'm Kyle Zimmer, and I run a program called First Book. We're based in Washington, D.C., but we really happily have a network that includes about 180,000 classrooms and programs serving kids 0 to 18 years of age with a real focus on low income. I want to make one quick comment at sort of the 60,000-foot level, because I walked into this room loving librarians and libraries, and I can still close my eyes and see the linoleum in the Zanesville, Ohio children's library section. It was brown and tan. I don't know who made that decision, but we can talk about that later. And I'm always blown away by what's going on in libraries and children's museums. And I think, as I was sitting here today, I was thinking to myself, this is a tough period that we're all living through. I mean, major institutions that we sort of thought were bulletproof or hoped were bulletproof, the court system, law enforcement, are sort of showing their vulnerabilities and their failures. And and when I was, and you look at things, and then you find out that like our currency is being controlled by 6 guys in a private chat room, and so things that you thought were sort of above all that are not. And I think there's significant disillusionment going on. And when I sat here, I thought, you guys are standing in complete stark contrast to those failures, and you're stepping up to social issues that have challenged the country for decades and decades, employment and immigration and disabilities, and the list just goes on and on. So I just wanted to do a huge shout out to you all, because I am 10 steps removed from your work, but it is jaw-dropping what you're doing out there. So now that I've said that, I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm the one who should be applauding. So First Book has built 2 big jet engines. One is called the First Book National Book Bank. And the book bank is the older of the 2. What it does is places excess inventory from the publishing industry and other industries and puts them through the First Book network and into the hands of kids and people who are trying to serve kids at the bottom of the economic pyramid. And that program places about 10 million books annually. It is the individuals and the institutions don't pay for the books. They only pay a shipping and handling fee that on average is about 45 cents per book. It's a ridiculously efficient system, and so it's very high volume and it's very low cost. The bad news about it, and you guys would know this before I even say the sentence, is that it does not fix the problem. It doesn't get teachers what they need. It doesn't get volunteers what they need necessarily, right? It's a lovely program, but we need to fix the fundamental issues. So then about 10 years ago, we invented something called the First Book Marketplace. And we went to the publishers and we said, look, the consignment design of the book industry, which means that anything that's not bought at retail comes flying back to the publishers. That fundamentally, and this is an MBA term, so I'll say it really slowly, it screws it up for everything that all of us are trying to achieve, right? Because what it means is they have to bake into their price point at retail the cost of all that inventory that's going to come flying back, right? So we end up with premium picture books that cost $18 a piece. Nobody knows that, like the pain of that, like you guys. And so we went in and said to the publishers, let's fix that. Let's fix that problem. And we said, what we'd like to do is build a system where we aggregate the market of anyone serving kids in need. All they have to do is register with us for free online. And then we will buy on a non-returnable basis inventory, and not excess inventory, but like the best in show. That's what we try for. And so we built the marketplace, and we said to the publishers, you know, what we want you to do now, since you're not paying to aggregate the market, you're not paying to advertise to this new market, and we are buying and the inventory is never going to come back to you, we want your prices to us to reflect that new market that we're building. So that's what the First Book Marketplace is. It now has about 6,000 titles on it. We're pushing that up as fast as we can. And the average price of a paperback book, including shipping and handling on the site, is $2.85. Yay. It's not where it needs to be. We want it to go lower all the time, but that's where we are today. Now, I want to talk, I'm just going to do a flyby, because I have 1 minute left, of a couple of different categories of partnerships. One is, of course, with IMLS, with the remarkable Open eBooks campaign that was announced at the White House earlier, just 3 or 4 weeks ago. And that's an extraordinary effort. First Book is stepping up to be the authenticator to make sure the ebooks and content really only go to kids in need. Secondly, though, I want to talk about our partnership with the publishers to address diverse content. And these are just examples, but it's called Stories for All. And what we've said to the publishers is, look, you know, we want to knock down the barriers, the market-based barriers to developing diverse content. So we've had a series of initiatives that I will not drag you through at this moment, but they will be on the final exam. So that what we've tried to do is we've tried to incentivize the publishers to prove to them that there really is a market for high diversity in every category content, and we're working hard to push that through. We added 650 titles to the site just this last year through that. And in addition, one last category is in the research world. Ellen Galinsky, some of you may know, is a child development expert out of New York. We wanted to make her work accessible to the kinds of institutions we serve. We sat with her. We developed tip sheets that address, that made it actionable. 7 sets of tip sheets and then we married those tip sheets in with specific children's books so that a Head Start teacher could grab the tip sheet and be, ready to roll within really moments. And we have been working, in fact, with libraries on that to distribute them. And we have so far, I think it's been about 8 or 9 months, we've done about 290,000 downloads of those tip sheets, 30% in Spanish. So my time is up. There are many more partnerships possible, and I would love to have libraries and children's museums even more involved in what we're building.
Great. Thank you, Kyle. Any clarifying questions? Great. Janet.
and Terry, I need you to help me out. I was kind of drafted at last minute, and I'm really proud to be part of this panel, and Terry's given me her device, and my notes are on that, so she has to log me in. But I'm Janet McKenney from the Maine State Library, and Maine's one of those, thank you so much, Terry. Maine's one of those rural states where partnerships are so vital to anything that we do because we have this large geographic area and this very small population. So Maine just has a population of 1.3 million, and I'm thinking about here being in Los Angeles, just the population here, it blows my mind. We're also the least densely populated state east of the Mississippi. We have 16 counties. We have 260 libraries, and over half of those serve populations under 2,500. So that gives you a little bit of snapshot. So those partnerships are really necessary for any kind of successful initiative that we do. And before I talk about our partnership with Cornerstones and our IMLS grant, I wanted to mention that we just had a great partnership with DHHS in Maine. We're able to get an early literacy consultant with a partnership with DHHS, so they funded the position for us. And the idea was to train Maine library staff, child care providers, preschool teachers, and parents, especially parents in Maine's maternal, infant, and early child home visiting program. And the idea was actually to go into the community and bring together the librarians and the preschool teachers and the child care providers so that they could all work together for the goal of their community in raising everybody's awareness of those early literacy skills. 70% of our Maine library directors and staff don't have degrees in library science. So training is essential to what we do, and that's been the focus of our early literacy consultant as she's traveled throughout the state this year. And we do have continued funding through DHHS, and we might also have funding from state government because this has been such an important initiative. As far as Cornerstones of Science, they're a private nonprofit organization that's worked in Maine since 1999. It was an organization founded by a gentleman named Lee Grodskins. He was, when he retired from the physics department at MIT, he came up with this idea of doing science programming in public libraries. And he started at the Curtis Memorial Library in Brunswick, Maine, and was very successful at Curtis Memorial, and then they started going to other libraries and kind of built on that. And then they kind of met a capacity level at some point and weren't getting cooperation from public libraries who were afraid of that science word. So they reached out to us at the state library and said, we need help building this program in libraries. They probably had maybe like 10 libraries. And so we signed a formal memorandum of understanding with Cornerstones and started working together with what we knew about our public libraries in Maine, what we knew about the staff capacity, what we knew about the leadership. And so suddenly they started growing their program. And right now they're working with over 40 libraries in Maine. And we're really excited because we got a leadership grant from IMLS to help us expand the program, engage with more libraries in Maine and also in Massachusetts. The Massachusetts Library of Board of Commissioners kind of operates very differently than the Maine State Library, so we thought a partnership with them would be really helpful as we looked at this program and want to share with other state library agencies kind of the methods that we've developed in Maine to engage with libraries of certain sizes and different capacities. So we've learned a lot in the last 6 years with Cornerstones, and we're going to try to build a national resource. I shouldn't say try, right? I said we are going to But it's basically about building capacity at the local public library level to offer science programming. And this is from early literacy to early ages to adults. And there's a variety of programs and ways that we work with Cornerstones. And one of the ways is through training, and so that libraries learn that there are resources in their communities that they can go to. And it's not only financial, but it's also those resources that are related to science. And, is there a company in Maine company in their community that can do presentations? And they're interested in promoting science as well. So they offer science cafes. We have these great science trunks that are, like a program in a box that are delivered to libraries. And, one of them's, of course, on lobstering because it is Maine. The most popular one, I think, is the CSI science kit. So it's like a crime solver, and it's all about, DNA. Cornerstone, one of the great things about partnerships is that you can solve problems together. So Cornerstones was having a problem with the capacity with the science trunks. And we have a scheduling piece of software at the state library. And so what we did is we took on the responsibility of creating a scheduling calendar for Cornerstones. We put them on our van delivery service. So now the libraries can go to the state library website or the Cornerstones website, click on schedule a trunk, and it gets scheduled, and then it's delivered via van delivery service. So this is a perfect way to demonstrate how partnerships can work. Everybody brings a certain amount of strength to the partnership. So this is, one way that, we've helped Cornerstones, and Cornerstones helps our public libraries. And I think I'll end there in case there's any questions.
Great, thank you. Please help me welcome our three panelists. So I want to give you all the time rather than me ask questions, although I do have a few. But I'd like to open it up to all of you to ask questions, share your own stories, lift up other ideas around partnerships so that we learn from each other.
Janet is going to take the math questions.
We threatened that we were going to ask trigonometry
and I was telling them my daughter, was a mathematics and applied physics major, but that kind of skipped a generation. She's not here. I can text her, though.
This is Sandy Toro from IMLS. Again, I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to say that I appreciate that Janet talked about that partnership, because many proposals aren't successful because they don't tap into the expertise that's available. So we will get many proposals about science projects where STEM professionals aren't involved in any way, and so we have to direct them to resources that already exist online, or there are lots of repositories and databases that are already in existence. And so I would just encourage applicants, even though that's not the focus of today, but when putting together proposals, think about who has the expertise you need, whether it's early learning and cognitive development, or it's STEM expertise, or it's art or history. There's so many people that can work with you who can bring that knowledge, and then you can reciprocate in terms of whatever your strengths are. So thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, here.
I'm Kathy Robbins from Billings, Montana. On the science trunks, do you have like an inventory list of what's in there, and how many do you have? Okay, so if you provide a science trunk, you might be able to provide it. Is that for one person? Is that for a classroom? What would that be for?
It's usually for a program at the public library. I magically copied down all the trunk topics, so I'm really happy. Currently, we have butterflies and bugs, human body, blood and bones. There's a trunk on creativity. Get a clue, solve a crime. That's the CSI one. lobster science, of course, I mentioned that. Mammal tracks, and there's one called Paint Science that talks about cave paintings and things like that. And so there's interactive activities, so a librarian gets all the instruction. There are books included in part of it as well, so the books can be lent out or they can be read as part of a story time. So it's hands-on activities, instructions for the librarians. Fun. The lobster comes with a dress-up costume, so a kid can dress up as a lobster. So, who doesn't want that? I think the CSI one comes with like a detective hat, so the kids, pass it around and stuff like that. So Cornerstones actually puts this together, and we've been like suggesting new topics for them, and so they're thrilled to get suggestions for new topics, and so that's where the interaction with the libraries as partners is like, we loved the lobster one. Can we do something? Can you do something on blueberries, because blueberries are important in Maine, and so. So it's great. They come in these big plastic boxes and, like real industrial kind of locks and everything on them. And so everything's in there. So it's kind of like a program in a can. And so those are really attractive to our basic libraries. So even our smallest rural library can get that trunk and deliver it with confidence.
Great.
One of the things, just to build on that we were trying to do in our project is that states have what's called early learning standards. In the K-12 world, you've heard about Common Core. Well, in the early learning world, there are early learning standards that go from birth to 5. And one of the things we're really working hard on in our project is how do you understand those volumes, because sometimes it's multiple pages, make it visible to a librarian that's only one children's librarian that's got an activity, and how does she attach the early learning standards? So you might have the kit on lobsters, but what early learning principle, what early learning skill, what early learning knowledge is that child getting? And not only so the librarian understands it, but so you can communicate with the family. So that coming to the library is a good experience, but it's also building that core knowledge, skills, and abilities that children need to enter school ready to learn. Not ready to learn. They're always learning, but
Ready to
continuing
succeed.
learn, ready to succeed.
Kyle.
Just one quick footnote is many people think because the name of the organization is First Book that all we do is books. And what we really have started doing very aggressively in the last couple of years is expanding way beyond that. And so when I hear the list of all the resources, and I've heard the example today of all the great things you're doing, I'll give you a couple of quick examples. We heard that kids were showing up hungry, so we went out and got 30,000 units of long shelf life healthy foods and made those available. We heard that from our network that kids were missing school because of during the winter, not having winter coats. So we made a partnership with Operation Warm, and you can buy 6 great-looking coats for kids in a box for $125. I'm just using those as examples to say we want to be your Labrador retriever. We want to hear from you. What do you need? What resources do you need? And let's see if we can go out and broker a deal so that your dollars either are not spent at all or are go much further through us.
Way in the back, and then we'll come to this third table.
Hi, I'm Judy Reno from Phoenix Public Library, and I had a question for Kyle. I think that sounds really, really cool, and I was wondering, are you working with anyone in Arizona, and is there opportunity to do so?
We may be, but I'm not specifically aware of it. But yes, call me.
There's an invitation.
Yeah, quite seriously, I'm very genuine about it. I think that we are a millionfold more powerful together than we are putting detached rescue ropes into the same populations. And the only reason First Book exists is to serve people like you and your colleagues who are on the front lines. That is 100% of the reason that we are in business. So absolutely, I'm being funny about it, but I mean it genuinely. Call me.
First Book has been an incredible partner to so many people across the nation, and so thank you, Kyle, for the work that you've done. But I think the message here, too, is that there are so many potential partners for you. Yep. So many people that want to be with you hand in hand, whether it's on early literacy, which is our topic today, but on many other ways to reach families and to reach children in the way that we need to. There were 2 questions in this third table.
Can I just pipe up for a moment? First, I want to jump on that First Book train for a minute. Is it on? It's on.
Yes, you're on.
It's on. I can vouch for that First Book readiness to respond because, Kyle mentioned the Open eBooks initiative. Do people here know about that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Raise your hand if you know about ebooks. Fabulous.
So some don't. So that gives me license to talk about it just for a moment. We started working together, and the White House became interested in an effort to provide access to a lot of free ebook reading material for low-income kids, for kids who needed help bridging that digital divide. So we went to where we had been investing, and we went to New York Public Library, who is building this wonderful library simplified platform that is an accessible ebook platform. And we said, can we work together? And they said, yes, we're in. And then we talked to the Digital Public Library of America, who is all about community. And we said, can you harvest and unite the great community across the United States? Get everybody in on this because we need to curate the reading material. And they said, yes, we're absolutely in on this. And then there was the question of, well, how are we going to find the right kids? The publishers were really excited about this and were very willing to give for free, and it ended up being $250 million worth of content from, HarperCollins and the big publishers. Hachette. Oh, well, you go to the place that already does that and does that the best, and that was First Book. And Kyle had been to IMLS once. She didn't really know us. And I called up and said,
it was a great meeting.
Hey, it was a really good meeting, yeah. But I said, hey, would you mind? And I cannot tell you the response that I got, which was so, we want this to happen. We will help you in any way. We don't, some partners they always need the ego thing. There was none of that there. It was truly, we will selflessly help you in any possible way we can. And that was just magnificent and awesome, and she probably regrets it now because there's an awful lot of work that we all have to do, and I think the partnership will grow from here. But I just wanted to say that. While I'm talking about that whole White House partnership, I do want to mention Susan Benton is here, and several colleagues who are affiliated with the American Library Association in some way. We also have the Connect Ed Library Challenge that was launched. Some of you in the room have signed up to it, too, so that's exciting. That was an effort. Again, the White House is holding up the work that we do and holding up this wonderful partnership. That was an effort to challenge communities to have the librarian, the mayor or the county city executive, and the school superintendent, singular or plural, whomever those 3 entities are in a community, to come together and pledge to get a library card into the hand of every kid as soon as they're in school. And I think our bigger goal is to break down barriers within communities. We're talking about it because it's about the library card, but it's really about letting the kids walk through the community and have access to all the resources that should be available to them without running into the silos that are our organizational silos. So we've had a wonderful time getting that off the ground. Am I forgetting to say anything? No? We're going to have a convening in the fall. Ultimately, we'd love the whole country to be in on that. And I think having the White House hold that up and help us knock on the doors of mayors and school superintendents and say to them, we care about this, make this happen, is really giving us a push. And I hope that you'll all join us. So that was my commercial interruption. I'm going to give it back to the questions.
Thank you, Maura. And I know we're out of time, and we had 2 questions. Do I take them? Do I move on? Great. Okay. So I think both of you had questions in this third table from the front. Mm-hmm. Yes.
This is a question to any or all of you, because we're talking about cross-sector partnerships. If you had an example of an assumption that you had about the sector that you were working with going in, and that where that assumption shifted as you began engaging with them.
That's a great question.
Go ahead.
Janet.
I was just thinking, with Cornerstones of Science, we have a telescope project, and part of the training is outreach to organizations to help train the librarians and families and to do presentations. And I was like, we're really going to get people for free, but the astronomy groups in the state are just dying to go to the library, and they've been very generous, not only with their time to their local public library, but they've committed matching funds for our IMLS grant, the Southern Maine astronomy group, and it's only takes 1 or 2 people, but some of them are retired and they're passionate, and so people that are passionate are really willing to volunteer, and so it's good for our libraries to know that you don't always have to pay for somebody to come, and that's part of what's going on with our grant.
Thank you. Sherri, did you want
I want to say one thing that I learned about libraries is that you're really understaffed in a lot of ways, and some of what's necessary to do. Remember, I'm coming from the state level, not really being in your space. Some of what's necessary to do the work requires more. And so libraries were able to dig down and give more, but we really do have to figure this out because you are a place. And as long as people come to you, everything's okay. But when you got to reach out or go out and do more so that some families who don't traditionally have access or who may want access, but you have to do it in a different way, your greeter might have to be different. It might have to be done in a different language. You might have to shepherd people till they understand the space. That takes a little bit more energy. You're willing, but finding the bandwidth to do it and getting the professional development and training to know how is missing. And one of the tools we created is about family engagement and helping both libraries, museums, and early childhood systems really think about what it really means to engage a family, and it's not just being an open space that's available.
And Sherri, just very quickly, can you share if that toolkit will be available to other states and how people might access that?
Yeah, it'll be available to all states. It'll be available at midsummer. It'll be online, and I'm happy, of course, to take calls and talk people through it.
Great, thank you. I'm so sorry that we're out of time. I want to leave you with just one final challenge to really, really think about those most vulnerable families, the children and the families who we oftentimes don't remember that they need you, and they're hungry for reaching you. Families that live in housing, public housing, or kids that are in family, friend, and neighbor care. Lots of people wanting to help and to partner with you, and 3 great examples here today. Please help me thank them once again.
I'm so excited about you.